She thought she was visiting her son's grave for peace, a quiet moment away from the noise of the world. But instead, she found something that shattered her heart, a young black waitress, broken in tears, clutching a child at the foot of a headstone. Why was she there? What secret tied her pain to a wealthy woman's loss? What began as grief soon unraveled into something much darker, an injustice that money, power, and silence had tried to bury. But the truth was waiting to be uncovered. She was a woman who seemed untouchable: wealth, power, influence. A billionaire whose life was marked by success but shadowed by loss. Her son, gone too soon, had left a hole in her heart that no amount of money could fill. She visited his grave often, finding comfort in routine, in the quiet stillness of the cemetery where the noise of the world couldn't reach her. For all her fortune, grief made her human, fragile in a way she never showed in public. On the other side of town lived a waitress, young and hardworking, raising her child alone. Life for her was a constant struggle, long shifts, small paychecks, and the unspoken weight of being judged for the color of her skin. She carried her burdens quietly, never letting the world see how heavy they were. But even strength is its breaking point. Two women, from worlds apart, had no reason to cross paths. Yet, fate has a way of tying lives together in places where silence speaks the loudest. The cemetery was one such place. A mother mourning a son, a waitress hiding her pain. Their stories should have never touched, but they did, and what was revealed in that meeting was more than coincidence. It was a reflection of injustice that reached far beyond a single grave, exposing truths that demanded to be seen. The billionaire mother stood frozen as her eyes locked on the young waitress at her son's grave. The woman's tears weren't ordinary grief. They were the kind that carried years of pain, shame, and struggle. Her child, too young to understand the world's cruelty, clutched her hand, looking up with wide, frightened eyes. Something about their presence didn't feel random. It felt like a story demanding to be heard, even if it broke her. The waitress had lived her life surrounded by invisible walls. Every day she carried trays to tables where she was ignored, belittled, or dismissed, not for her work, but for her skin. Customers demanded her silence, her smile, her obedience, as though her humanity didn't belong in the room. Her paycheck was barely enough to feed her child, yet her spirit pushed her forward. She had endured insults whispered under breath, tips withheld out of spite, and managers who reminded her she was lucky to even have a job. Still, she kept going, until the night her world collided with something far worse. Her child had fallen sick, fever burning, body trembling. She rushed to the hospital, desperate for help, but what met her wasn't compassion. It was a wall of indifference. Nurses walked past her, please. A doctor questioned her insurance before touching her child. Hours slipped away in the waiting room as others, with lighter skin, were taken in first. She begged. She cried, but her voice seemed invisible. By the time they received care, the damage had already been done. The boy survived, but a part of him, and of her, would never be the same. And then came the funeral of the billionaire's son. A story had spread quietly, hidden in hushed conversations and local whispers. The waitress's child had been denied treatment at the same hospital where the billionaire's son had once been admitted without hesitation. The connection was chilling. One life preserved with privilege, another almost lost of prejudice. Standing at the grave, the waitress's tears weren't just for her own suffering. They were for every locked door, every turn back, every moment her worth had been weighed against the color of her skin. She didn't know the billionaire mother would be there. She hadn't come to be seen. She had come because the injustice carved into her life mirrored the loss carved into that stone. And as the billionaire stood watching, her heart raced. She had built her empire believing her wealth could shield her from the world's cruelty. But now she was staring at proof that cruelty didn't care about money. It cared about skin. The question burned inside her. Was her son's death somehow tied to the system that nearly destroyed this woman's child? And if so, what truths had been buried? Truths she was never meant to uncover. The billionaire mother's chest tightened as the pieces fell together. The waitress's grief wasn't random. Her tears weren't misplaced. They were stitched to the very system that had failed her own son. The truth hit like a blow. Her boy hadn't simply died from illness. He had been carried swiftly through every door, every treatment, every option, because privilege had paved the way. But privilege had not saved him. And for the waitress's child, those same doors had stayed locked, guarded by prejudice and quiet cruelty. The waitress remembered that night with clarity that never faded, the way the receptionist's eyes slid over her, the way doctors turned their attention elsewhere, as though her cries were background noise. She remembered her child's hand burning in haze as she begged for help. She remembered watching lighter-skinned families walking after her and leave before her, their children cared for while haze remained invisible. Every minute carved fear into her bones. Every second reminded her that in this world, her worth was always in question. Standing now at the grave, the billionaire felt her grief twist into something sharper. For the first time, she saw how her son's death was not just personal. It was a mirror reflecting a society where life and death could be decided not by illness, not by chance, but by skin. The weight of that truth pressed down on her. If her son, with all the power, money, and access she had, could still be lost, then what chance did this woman's child ever have? The silence between them grew heavy, filled with all the words unspoken, all the years of injustice carried quietly by those forced to endure it. And in that silence came the most painful question of all. How many more graves would it take before the world finally admitted the truth? The cemetery grew quiet again, but nothing was the same. Two women stood in silence, one with a weight of privilege, the other with a weight of survival. Their pain came from different worlds. Yet in that moment, it was bound together by the same unshakable truth. Injustice had no borders. It touched every life, whether through the absence of a son or the denial of a child's worth. The billionaire walked away that day not with answers, but with a burden she could no longer ignore. Her money could build skyscrapers, fund charities, and command boardrooms, but it could not erase what she had seen, the way racism had crept into hospitals, workplaces, and everyday lives, deciding who mattered and who did not. She realized grief was universal, but the conditions that shaped it were not. Some families mourn because of chance. Others mourn because of systems designed to fail them. And the waitress, she left still carrying her scars, but with a strange, fragile hope. For the first time, someone who lived in a world far above haze had witnessed a pain without turning away. Maybe it wouldn't change everything, but maybe it could start something.